If you're a residential real estate agent earning $200,000 a year and you want to grow your passive income, this show's for you. Learn the secrets other agents use and hear from experts in our field in order to guide you along your journey to investing in assets like apartment communities so that you can turn your commissions into cash flow. I'm Randall McLeod. Let's go, baby. All right, welcome back. Today, I've got a special guest on. His name is Troy Schlicker. He is the broker and owner of Reserve Realty. He's out of Austin. Interesting conversation. We talk about real estate, his journey, how he got started and transitioned out of the mortgage business into being a full-time realtor in the Austin market. We talk about investments a bit and kind of what he would have as advice to investors looking at the Austin market specifically. He's the host of two different podcasts. So we kind of talk about how he got started in those podcasts and why he started them. And then off air, we talked about, how the benefits of just having a podcast are for, growing his network in the Austin market. He gets to talk to a lot of business owners. The way he's structured his, it's really going around interviewing business owners. And it's something that you could take in your business as well. And you could actually go out and use this strategy to get to know people in your market and business owners specifically. And so he's done a cool thing as well. He's kind of niched down with some of his shorts that he's created and made it to where he can go into a specific city around Austin and talk very specifically about that market, what it looks like. Hey, I'm here, I'm touring a house, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. If you're buying a house as a business owner in Cedarville, which is Cedar Park, which is just outside of Austin, he can talk specifically to that market and how he can become the expert in that market just by putting out some of these shorts. So it's strategies and tactics that you can actually use and implement in your business when you're going out trying to grow your active income. And then we get to the end, we talk about some investments and how he's not invested in real estate, and he's looked at some other strategies to grow his income through either investing in stocks, cryptos, and that sort of thing. So interesting take. One thing that we do discuss at the end is really his desire to have multiple streams of income, and whether or not that's through real estate or not. Again, it's something that you can take and say, okay, how can I grow my cash flow? If it's not investing in real estate, what are some other strategies that I can use? So listen to the end. Hope you're getting a lot of value out of the show. As always, jump on, rate and review, helps me out a lot. Just get the word out and helps the reach with the show. So without further ado, let's bring on Troy. Let's go. All right, Troy, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on today. Why don't you start? Tell us, I know you're in the Austin market, but tell us a little bit about what you do, what you focus on, the types of, properties, clients, and price points that you really like to focus on.
Sure. So my name is Troy Schlicker. I'm a broker at Reserve Realty, which is just my own brokerage, but I'm a single agent, so I don't have, 100 other agents underneath me either. It's just kind of nice to be able to do my own thing and not have to deal with some of the other things that can happen when you're at another brokerage.
I second that.
But I've been down in Austin, Texas now for about 18 years, originally from the Midwest, and I've had my real estate license for a little bit over 8. Previous to that, I was a mortgage loan officer at Bank of America for about 5. So really good knowledge of both the lending side of things as well as the real estate side of things. I do exclusively residential real estate and primarily single family. So usually it's helping families, buy and sell homes, occasionally helping them with investment properties as well too. I do occasionally work with investors, but I find that a lot of times investors, so I kind of have two distinctions, right? There's I want to invest in real estate, and there are real estate investors. So I want to invest in real estate are people who think they're real estate investors, but they really have full-time jobs and they just want to put some money into real estate because it's a good investment in a lot of cases long-term. And so those type of people do a lot of times need a real estate agent or somebody else to kind of help them because they can't spend the time finding deals or working a lot of the working things. They need help understanding the market. Unfortunately, a lot of them think they're real estate investors and are going off of trying to get the same types of deals that a true real estate investor does, who's spending 40 hours or more a week trying to find the best deal out there has all of the back end stuff to make sure they can get a place remodeled if they're doing a fix and flip and all these kind of things. And so true real estate investors like that are really full-time into it, I feel like usually don't really need a real estate agent very often. Usually they have their own license because they can save the money on the commission and stuff that way. The real estate people who want to invest in real estate, I'll generally help them as long as they have a good understanding of what they actually are trying to do. Too often I find people that want you to do all the work for them, but don't understand that, well, we need to have some type of commitment to what's going on and stuff. And so it's kind of the real estate investing side of the world can be kind of a tricky animal that way. But for people who own homes and know that real estate's a good investment, I definitely have helped a number of them buy properties that they use as investments and rent out or do not a ton of fix and flip time stuff. It's more long-term hold, but I'd say still the majority of my clients are people who are buying their homes as primary residences. I kind of work in West Austin, so the price points tend to be, $500, $600, $700 on the low side into the up to about 2 million kind of price point on the high side of things. Again, occasionally for the right clients have occasionally gone less than that and occasionally gone more than that, but that's kind of that sweet spot in kind of West Austin for clients that are either relocating within Austin, or a lot of times with how Texas and Austin specifically are growing, a lot of times it's relocation, people moving from outside the city or outside the state.
Yeah. I was going to say West Austin. Are you doing any of the lakes up there? Is it?
The lakes are tricky, but in one, honestly, you have to go more than $2 million to really get on the lake in a lot of cases. That's kind of like that real estate person who wants to invest in real estate, but thinks they're a true real estate investor. So a lot of times you'll get people that are like, well, yeah, I would like to get a home on the lake, but my budget's $700,000. And I'm like, well,
buy the dirt.
Not gonna happen. Like, even the dirt in a lot of cases is going to be more than that in those cases. But the lakes are kind of a unique thing. It's also interesting, the lakes, when you have people relocating, because I don't know how familiar you are with Austin specifically, but like Lake Travis, all the lakes. We're talking about Midwest. I'm from Michigan, Minnesota. We have tens of thousands of lakes in both states. Here in Texas, you don't. And all the lakes that you do have are man-made lakes. So they're all dammed up.
Yeah.
Versus actual natural lakes.
Mostly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have Lake Austin, which is primarily a constant level lake. You can't really say that because at some point in time down the road, they could decide, hey, we don't want to keep it at this level. But currently, and for the 18 years I've lived here, it's basically stayed at a certain level to make sure that it, gets for hydraulic power for different things. They want it that way. Where Lake Travis is the one lake on the Highland Lakes chain that has the most fluctuation in the reservoir. And so that one's tricky because people don't realize sometimes that, oh, great, a home's on the lake right now. Well, in 3 years, it might not be on the lake. And so are you really buying a true lake home? Now, it's still a lot of times better than not being on the lake at all, because you can use it sometimes. The views are really amazing, but there's definitely very stark differences between that. But the other thing that'll happen is you'll have clients people that are thinking about relocating, they're like, oh yeah, we could go live in Lago Vista. And I'm like, well, where do you work? Well, we work in downtown. And if you look at the map, the way the crow flies, you're like, oh, that's not that big a deal. But I'm like, yeah, that's an hour and a half drive all the way around the lake. Like, we don't have, Lake Travis doesn't have some nice, simple bridges just to get across the lake really quickly. So that's definitely an education point for people who aren't familiar with the area a lot of times.
Yeah. This was years ago. This must have been right after, no, not right after the financial crisis. It was sometime recently. A buddy of mine was living in Austin, and he sent me a link to buy a bunch of lots in Lago Vista. And I was like, I don't know, if we would have crushed it had we bought those lots at the time, but they were like so inexpensive. That place has exploded over there. I just didn't know if you were doing it at the lakefront properties at the 5 to 2 price point, because what's like a median price in Austin right now?
So like median price point of just any home right now is about 5.5.
Okay.
So overall, but that includes, 1-bedroom condos in certain areas and stuff too. So even though that is the kind of where it's at, I still feel like usually it really for most homes, it tends to be, in my opinion, probably closer to 6 if you're in Austin. Again, you can get outside of Austin, get to Buda, Elgin, Jarrell, some of the outskirts, and it's not too bad. But if you're like in Lakeway or Cedar Park and stuff, it tends to be a little bit more expensive as well.
Yep. Okay. So one of the things that I ask a lot of people when I'm catching up, again, the premise of the show is to build some cash flow up, make more active income so that you can turn that into passive income by investing it into some form of investment, whatever that is, whether it's, multifamily or storage or a syndication or anything like that, or something non-real estate related, even that produces cash flow. So what I like to ask is, how are you finding business? Are you doing certain things that you feel earn you more business than other people in your market because you're doing X, Y, and Z? Or is there some kind of, secret sauce you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's any kind of super secret sauce. For me, a lot of it is trying to stay as connected to past clients and connecting your database. I think what a lot of people, the National Association of Realtors talks about something like 80% of people who buy or sell a home don't use that same agent on their next deal. And again, in a lot of cases, that's a couple years down the road. So if you're investing, 6 months down the road, it's really a bad sign if you're not using the same agent. Something probably didn't go well at all. But if it's 3 to 5 years down the road, 5 to 7 years down the road, like the average homeowner, and you're not doing it, well, is that because the agent's no longer in the business, or is that because the agent hasn't actually stayed in touch with the clients that they have? And for a lot of people, because of the nature of this business, you're really kind of thinking, well, what's the next deal? What's the next deal? And a lot of times we can forget what of the people that have already had the good experience with us. And so fostering those relationships, both for a reoccurring business standpoint, but also then getting referrals is a huge part of my success. And I think can be a missing component for a lot of people as well, too, because again, it's not likely when you close on one deal, again, unless it's an investor who's like, hey, well, let's find the next deal. But if it's not that situation, well, you're not likely to go back to that client and have them help you find a deal in the next month or two. And bills are still due in the next month or two. So a lot of times we tend to take our eye off the ball and go find the next deal, which you have to do. But by fostering that relationship, I have a few clients that have bought, again, multiple times in the time that I've been here, and also referred multiple family members, friends and family. And so really having people like that know, like, and trust you is huge, because then you're also not fighting over people trying to gouge the pricing that you do stuff for, trying to use you or try to, I just need you to show me a home, but you have 7 other agents that you have showing you homes and stuff like that too. So really trying to build that trust long-term, which is why, most people who get their real estate license don't keep it after the 2 years that it takes for it to expire, because it's not a hard business to do. It still requires more work than people realize when they first get into it.
Yeah. Sounds like stick with the fundamentals. Do you use anything that like, are you on a certain CRM or anything that you use?
Yeah, I use Follow Up Boss. I've been using that now for about the last year. I was using a company called Sync or Commissions Inc. for a while, but they had a lot of other back-end stuff that I didn't necessarily use. And so Follow Up Boss has been but for me, it's basically, hey, how can I send out a monthly email newsletter type thing? I really probably should up that to like twice a month, honestly. And then how can I make sure and keep in contact with people? Because again, it's not natural for me to just start reaching out to people via text or via phone call and stuff. But if I'm like, oh, hey, these are people you haven't reached out to in the last 90 days, 120 days, like just, send them a text and say hi. Kind of like we were talking about with networking in general, right? Like if you're reaching out to people on stuff other than requesting sales, right? If the only time you're reaching out is, hey, do you know anybody that needs to buy or sell real estate? That doesn't always come off the best and isn't necessarily going to be, most people at that exact moment you text them or call them don't know someone like that. But if you're constantly staying top of mind as someone who's an expert in the field, when they do get a family member, a friend, a coworker who talks about like, yeah, we're thinking about buying a home, then they may hopefully are going to be thinking about you like, whoa, you should use my real estate agent. He was great and helped me, with when we bought our home, and it was, made the process a lot smoother.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, we were talking about the podcast, and the way you've structured that and the way you've set that up, I like it. Maybe it was unintentional and you just wanted to talk to local business owners, but the whole idea of having an interesting conversation with locals that then you can just have that conversation over and over with as many people in Austin as you can. That is just fun in general, or it's nice to be able to have that if those are the conversations you enjoy. Builds your network that way, and it also puts you in touch with people who are likely to be buying and selling property. Again, whether it was an intentional reason to go after that or not, it's just one of the nice offshoots of doing that.
There definitely was some intention of like, hey, would this be, is spending the time doing this worth your time? And like you say, so we were talking about, I play beach volleyball. Well, like from a business standpoint, there's not really much of a benefit other than maybe some of the people you play with all the time might want to buy at home. But like the time in and of itself isn't that productive, but I enjoy it so much. Being physically active is good, that you can do hobbies that aren't related to always generating money that just rejuvenate you and help you work hard when you are working. And so the podcast I do like it from that standpoint too. But I also did think like, hey, one, these are theoretically business owners, are the types of people who are invested in the community, are locally here in Austin. That is why I've made it like the Austin spotlight, right? Like I could interview small business owners around the country, but a lot less likely I'd be able to help them with real estate side of things if you're in Miami than if you're locally here in Austin. But it's also really interesting on small business owners, to see why they got into that business. Why did someone decide to start a bakery? Why did someone decide to start, XYZ business? Were they always entrepreneurial? Because for people like real estate agents who do tend to be a little bit more willing to take more risks, that's not something everyone wants to do. It's like, hey, you're 100% commission now. Like that's scary for a lot of people. And so it's interesting to meet other people that have a kind of a similar mindset of taking that leap of faith and wanting to take the risks to pursue their dreams and passions.
Yeah. Again, that's some of the stuff that you're working on. Also, all the shorts that you're putting out, like we talked about. I mean, I think those are solid. And then when you do have those conversations and somebody looks you up and then you have all of this content that's already out there, it's just like they can get to know you without ever having to have that conversation. So I'm kind of curious are you getting traction with the shorts, and how do you manage all of that? Are you doing all that yourself, or what are you shooting with the camera? Like what's the nuts and bolts of that?
Yeah. So for me, I just shoot with my phone. Most of the short stuff is just my phone, and then the CapCut app, which is pretty simple app to kind of do a little.
What was it called?
Quick Cut. CapCut.
AppCut. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically TikTok's editor. Like they kind of came out with it, but it makes stuff relatively easy that way.
Okay.
I have used third-party people in the past to do it, but video editing gets expensive very quickly, and so it's not something I'm currently using right now. It just business has been ebbing and flowing enough that I'm kind of like, okay, let me take some of the time and redo that and do some of those myself. I also haven't been producing quite as much content as I need to. So that's one of my kind of goals here moving forward, is to kind of ramp that back up, because it kind of, like a lot of things in life, it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It looked like you had a ton out there. When I was scrolling through your feed, I was like, oh man, I gotta up my game.
Yeah. And again, it's like the doing it, like even just the ebbing and flowing that I've done, because I've been at least ebbing and flowing for a while. So that does look like a lot more than a lot of people end up putting out. So constantly trying to get a little bit better at that. It's definitely, like, again, at this point, it hasn't been enough that like I'm just, inundated with sales just from that. Like some people can be from putting out content, but it has brought in business. And I do know, again, other people in my network and sphere who will either, the funniest part is there'll be people who don't ever comment or like the stuff or on Instagram or wherever it is. But then every once in a while, I'll see someone in person. They're like, oh, wow, you're putting out some amazing content and stuff. Right. Yeah. And so a lot of times you can get frustrated because it doesn't feel like what you're doing is having an impact. But in most cases, it's having much more of an impact than you realize. And it's really kind of that consistency to stay with it. That's going to be the deciding factor. So the only other thing I say, I know we were talking about a little bit too, is kind of tweaking up some of the videos a little bit, getting a little more granular and specific towards certain people. And then also, I know one of the things I want to do, which I have a couple videos out on my YouTube, but want to do more like neighborhood specific videos. So kind of talking about Clarksville, Allendale, Cedar Park, Lakeway, and some different areas to kind of let people binge some of the information, because that's the way most people work these days. Is like, you're usually not going to immediately just go to the expert and ask them for questions. You're going to go try to find out some of the information on your own. But then as you're doing that, if you find someone through Instagram, through YouTube, who this person is providing me good information, now you're a lot more likely to use that person when you actually do need their services. And so, it'd be great. I do talk about a lot in some of my videos, like, reach out to a realtor. If you're thinking about investing, if you're thinking about just buying or selling, or whatever, reach out to a realtor much earlier than you think you need to, because there's a lot of resources and knowledge that we can provide in that beginning phase as well that can help set you up for more success. And it's not like we're not an attorney that's going to start charging you billable hours because you got, some questions answered and stuff. Now, we might not be able to answer questions, in 15 minutes if you need a question answer. We have other things going on to do stuff in our business, but I'd much rather someone say, you know what, I'm a year away from really needing to do something, so I don't want to bug you. Like, you're not bugging me. Like, let's start the process slow now, and when we're ready, we're ready. Yeah,
I like that, man. So I kind of want to talk about the market a little bit. And you were a loan officer. I was a loan officer back in 2004. So it's been a minute, 4 through like 8. I was living in Australia, so I did it in 2 different countries. So we can talk about that a little bit, but I also want to talk about like investing in general as well. And we'll get to the investing then, because tell me when were you a loan officer, and then when why did you get out of it? That's the like question number one, really.
So I was a loan officer at Bank of America from like 2008, 9 till 2014 or so. The main reason I got out of it is I was ready to leave big corporation Bank of America. Like, there was so many small things that large companies, just the extra red tape that happens at large companies. And I was just kind of done with that. And so in transitioning from larger bank, I was like, well, okay, I could become a loan officer at a smaller bank, but I did have at Bank of America, you did have the one great thing is there's a lot more in, like, just sit on your desk and get leads fed to you type of thing versus having to go hunt and kill as much stuff on your own.
Yeah.
And so if I'd moved to a loan officer at a smaller, more independent kind of situation, I was going to have to do a lot of build up some of that anyway. And so it felt like a natural, like, potential break point of like, well, is this what you want to do then? Or did you want to go a different direction? And so I felt like, well, if I'm already not liking the red tape here, there's still going to be some red tape more red tape as a mortgage loan officer than there is as a realtor. And so do I want to like eliminate some of the red tape, or do I just want to like get rid of most of it and go the real estate route and try to make that happen? So that was kind of the impetus for why I made the shift at that time when I did it. I just wanted more freedom and more control versus having to have a great idea of a way to do things, but be like, well, this is never going to happen because you're at a Fortune 500 company and you do things the way we do things.
Yeah.
So that was the big thing. And so it's been, having that background I've always been math and analytical side of things always been kind of more natural for me anyway, but you add that with the mortgage knowledge and it's been super beneficial for my clientele, whether it's on the investing side of things. It has led me to be more of a buyer's agent, which I think most agents are when they first get started anyway, but it's something I'm super comfortable with as well, is, helping people understand their qualification, what makes sense for them, what they might be able to do to that, what they might be able to do to qualify for a little bit more, and just making things happen on the buyer side of things, doing the inspections and making sure, hey, here's some tricks so we can make sure this appraisal works out and all those kind of things. So.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was doing it, and my brother and I worked in the same shop for a while, and then I went to Australia. He kept doing it. So he saw the tail end of, the build up to the financial crisis. And he got out of it. And I remember having this conversation with him, like, what ended up getting you out of it? And I think he was doing a loan for a guy, and he got all the way to the closing table, and the guy had switched loan officers the day of closing. He's like, he had been working
loan officers.
Loan companies.
Yeah,
for like
wow.
maybe like I don't know, 10 basis points or some difference, right, in the spread that a guy could get him. And so he was like, not happening, never again, because there was no at the time loans. You could sign up and you could be getting a loan from this bank and from this bank, and then whoever had the best one, like you just pick at the day of close. So something like that happened. So I imagine, like we're at a mortgage brokerage and not a big bank. So I imagine that would be different. Obviously, like you said, you don't have to go out hunt and kill. You're getting a steady stream of leads coming to you any given day. So that was kind of cushy.
You're getting more. So we definitely got paid I knew other people who were on their own, and so you got paid a much smaller percentage of the deals, right?
Yeah.
Because of that. So you're having to do more, like to make the same amount of money as someone like you probably was doing. I would have to do a lot more business that way, but right, like it was again a lot more of, instead of, hey, I need to go network with a bunch of realtors so they'll send me deals. You have people that might come into the bank like, hey, we're thinking about buying a home, and you might get a bank that gets a referral sent to you that way, or people calling it. Like at one point in time, we even were part of like the 800 number. Someone might call to do it. Like they were trying to route those people to local loan officers just to make the experience hopefully a little bit more favorable that way. So, so that there were definitely advantages in that regard. So I'd gotten to the point where I was doing really well. I think it was our region, which was Los Angeles. Our region was Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. And I was like the third highest producing loan officer for Bank of America in those regions. And it was like I was hitting my cap time wise, but then trying to build a team at Bank of America was a nightmare. And so that was kind of the thing. It was like, okay, great, I'm doing really well, but now you should take some of the administration stuff off my plate so I can continue doing more loans, because me doing more loans is helping the bank. But that's not the way the bank saw it. They were like, no, we're just kind of make it like you could try to start a team, but it was like just kind of crazy how much it wasn't really effective to do that. So it's kind of like, I'm doing well, but the point is to keep growing. Like satisfying.
Nice. Okay, so you made that shift, and then so how did you get started in real estate, like the brokerage side of the business, and what was that transition like? Was it scary? Were you like, yeah, I'm all in, jumping both feet? You already knew real estate. You already understood it. So what was that? No,
it was definitely jumping both feet. I mean, I knew like it wasn't really that scary. I mean, like obviously there's some unknown components to it, but it's kind of like, you figure it out as you go, and you will make some mistakes. So, but like there's just, best way to go is really to kind of jump all in. I actually immediately started the brokerage. I couldn't be the broker initially because you have to be a licensed real estate agent and do so much in business before you can get your brokerage license. Yeah. But in the industry, we have a term kind of called rent-a-broker. So I knew another guy who was a broker who agreed to be the licensed broker for my business at the time. And so he did that for the first 4 years until I could get my broker's license. And then I was able to get it pretty much the day after my 4th year. So I could take it over myself. Yeah.
I think so. When I got mine, they had just changed the rules, and the rules were about to roll out.
It had just gone from 2 to 4. Like literally, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have done this a little bit earlier. But I was pretty confident that I wanted to have my own, either be like I am now, or maybe eventually some point, maybe grow a little bit of a team at, being the broker as well. And I was kind of like, well, if I want to do that, why would I go to a Keller Williams and do that for 4 years and then have to start on my own stuff anyway? Why not just go out on my own and do it from the start? Yeah. And so I was like, you might as well kind of climb those hurdles right away and get through them instead of.
Yeah. What's your split with your broker?
Pretty good. I have to deal with that.
Pretty good. Yeah, you pay yourself well. Okay,
that part is nice. I mean, obviously, and I've in talking to other people. I mean, not that there aren't some good things with going to the brokerage, right? Like I don't have a phenomenal training program. So if someone wanted to start as a brand new agent, I may not be the best person to necessarily help them. I have actually done that though for some people who were interested. But go if you really want all the training through Keller Williams or stuff like that, there are definitely some good things that way. And for some agents, like there are, even though you're paying a split, there might be some advantages in some of the network and stuff like that of some of the bigger players out there. It just kind of depends on how you're trying to grow your business and what your objectives are that way. So.
Yeah, same. Anytime new agents were coming on, my whole thing was focusing on investments anyway. We were just buying. I was doing all the marketing. I was that guy. I was that investor that you were talking about earlier in the show, who just had all the back end stuff set up. And so people that I knew that wanted to come on, I was like, look, I'm not going to train you if you want to do investments, cool, come over. I'll treat you. I'll teach you everything about investments. But if you want to do brokerage and that's your main thing, I would literally send them to Keller Williams. I was like, they have a great training program. They're going to walk you through everything and hold your hand. So, and then some of those guys came over and ended up working with me.
We're proud to be sponsored by Ridgeline Investment Group. Ridgeline has a track record of transacting more than $53 million in assets throughout Texas. Ridgeline is currently looking to acquire 100 to 200 unit Class B multifamily communities between 5 and 20 million in San Antonio, Temple, Waco, Tyler, and other Texas secondary markets. To learn more about Ridgeline Investment Group, visit www.ridgelineig.com.
So I want to talk some investments. I know you're in Austin. We're in San Antonio. I actually was talking to some commercial brokers the other day about some deals in Austin. I was looking at some properties up there. Multi-unit deals, 8 to 200 unit type things. Mm-hmm. The price per unit is much different. Just the market in general is a lot different. Just going from San Antonio to Austin, right? I just looked up our median in San Antonio. I think our median home price was $320 this past month compared to $360 last year, same month. So it's dropped a bit, or $340 maybe. So when you are, if you had an investor come to you and say, hey, I'm looking for something in the Austin market, like what area, what part of town, like what kind of conversation do you have with them?
Yeah. The first thing is kind of what is their objective, right? Like, because, if it's, again, that's kind of where, like, if it's an investor, so someone like yourself, you're going to know, a lot of the details, right? Versus someone that comes in and is like, oh, I want to invest in real estate. And so they're thinking, I was Googling stuff and it looks like an 8% cap rate is good. And I'm like, okay, but you want to buy a single family home in Austin, Texas with Austin property taxes. Like that's not going to happen in our market right now. So understanding what their actual goal is kind of the first step. Probably doing some education, right? I also, understanding the Austin market specifically, and I kind of feel like it's maybe even a little bit this way in Texas in general, but especially here in Austin, like if you're a true investor and you're probably not looking at single family homes in Austin, Texas, quite frankly, because one, most investors like yourself are looking larger units, right? You can get better deals, you can economies of scale and stuff that way, but also because of property taxes, it might be a lot better for you to find property outside of Texas. Now, if you're looking for that immediate recurring income side of things, right? Because if you're really looking for that passive income every month, there are places in the country that are going to get you a better cap rate due to, again, the property taxes being a lot lower, the market itself not being so competitive when you're trying to buy the home. And so, not that I'm happy for you to invest in Texas and in Austin, but something to be aware of in that regard. But if you're like, hey, I want to invest in Austin. I believe in Austin long term. I kind of want to probably buy and hold something. I understand that, the property taxes are going to take a bigger chunk than I realized. This, if you're a Californian wanting to do it, like you're kind of like, wow, the property taxes are high. Like they're almost what I pay and my home is double the price. So understanding those kind of situations is kind of the first step of what someone is really looking for, because again, I think a lot of people who, maybe not what you run into because you're specifically targeting your business to those bigger properties kind of side of things, but a lot of people that I run into who are real estate investors really just want to invest in real estate. And they're thinking, oh, I just want to buy a home in Austin and get an 8% cap rate on it. And that's just not going to happen. And so it's really kind of the understanding what they're looking for and what the what their goal is. And so assuming that they understand those things and they still want to move forward, then it's like, okay, well, what again, then what is the goal? Are we trying to maximize what we're getting for monthly income? Because then we're probably going to want to do something more east, south Austin area where prices are a little bit lower, but but the appreciation isn't quite as good if you're out in East Austin, if you're out towards Tesla, those kind of things. Or do we really want that long-term price appreciation growth? Well, then maybe we're looking in Cedar Park, West Round Rock, Leander, some of those areas. You're not going to get as much. The rent's going to be harder to cash flow as well, but you're probably going to see better appreciation because you have higher school districts, you're out closer to the lake. A lot of times the lots and views are worth more that way. So it's just really kind of trying to decide what the overall objective is for the investor.
Yeah. And you're speaking my language. I literally, like, so many times I have so many episodes that I go through and I talk about, hey, what are your goals? You got to figure out what your goals are. And so I had a conversation with some of the guys I play volleyball with, and I actually did an episode on it as well. Just because the guy's like, I want to buy a house. I want it to be near a university. I want to do this and this and this. And it was just an interesting conversation. I was like, why do you want to do that? What are you trying to do? And one of the guys sitting next to us was like, well, don't do that. You don't want to put money into a house. You don't have to buy. You don't have to do this. But the guy knew his goals. He knew what he wanted to do. And so I harp on that all the time. I'm like, if you're going to buy something, if you want to get into investing, you got to know your goals. And then you also spoke to the exact same thing. If you're looking for cash flow or cash on cash, higher cash on cash returns, then it's the asset, the type of property that you're going to go after is going to be not always different, but right now in this current market, it's going to be different. You're probably looking for a C class or something that's in a lower price point area, but you can still charge and command rents. Yeah, great advice. I think a lot, again, that's to me the difference between an investor and someone who wants to invest is like that investor's like, oh, this is kind of a rundown, not that great property, but it cash flows, but it does this. Yeah. Where that person wants to invest in real estate. Well, yeah, I first want to make a bunch of money from it, but I also want it to be the pretty house in the nice neighborhood with the good school district and all those kind of things. And it's like, well, that's not how you invest. That's not how an investor would do it, right? Like, and not that it's not wrong to maybe have that kind of property. So, for example, I have a client that bought property from California it's in the Leander area, and they were like, "Well, hey, we just want to get into the market right now. We know in 5 to 10 years, once our kids graduate, we're probably going to buy a home and move to Austin because we're kind of done living in California, and so we can buy a rental property here now, at least kind of break even, and then have that either." I don't know if they'll necessarily live in it, or they'll have a property here locally they can sell and just transition to their primary residence. But now they don't have to worry about, great, we should have bought 5 years ago when prices were less. Like, no, let's buy now. Yeah. And then when prices go up, we can sell this one that's also gone up in price. And now we can buy our retirement home with the sale of this other home type of thing. So again, it's really just kind of figuring out what those goals are. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about in Austin specifically, so I was listening to, I think it was Bigger Pockets podcast a couple of days ago, and I have an episode coming out tomorrow about this, but they interviewed one of the Fed chairs. I think she was in the Dallas Fed, and she's talking about current market situation and how all these guys went out and bought these short-term rentals, and how short-term rentals they're not getting the rents that they want. And so again, we're talking about Austin specifically. Do you see the short-term rental market? Do you have any insight into that market at all in Austin? And do you see any of those rates coming down, or people who own those having challenges getting them rented?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the statistics out there about Austin being like one of the top 5 worst year over year Airbnb. I think it's like income, for either percent rented or like total rent dollars. I can't remember off the top of my head specifically what that one is, but so Austin has been really tricky because they were, I feel like one of the first cities in the country to kind of do a pretty hard ban on short-term rentals, Airbnb rentals in the city limits. For a long, long time, the only because you had to get permitted. Now, obviously, there were definitely people that were doing it without getting permitted. So I got to that. But to do it legally, you had to get permitted, and the only types of properties you could Airbnb were either a multifamily property or a room or unit on a property you also owned, right? So like some people could do like A and B units and rent out the B unit or rent out a room in their home. You couldn't buy a property specifically as an investment property and rent that out Airbnb. Now they've kind of loosened some of those things a little bit. So that is, I'm sure, has allowed some additional people to get into it, but it's definitely made it so there's not necessarily, in my opinion, a huge glut of short-term rentals available in the market. I kind of think one of the things that's happened with Airbnb just in general, one, you have the end of COVID. So like people aren't quite as much like, hey, we need to just do Airbnb stuff. We need our own place all the time. But two, Airbnb also has gotten kind of ridiculous with some of the things that they require. Like the prices are a lot of times as much as a hotel is. And now you're also paying cleaning fees. But on top of the cleaning fees, you also have to do all your own cleaning. Like we need you to clean everything and just start the dishwasher and get all the beds undone and put it into the washing machine. And you can't be any noise past 9 o'clock. And I understand some of those things, but it's also kind of like, well, let me just go to a hotel and not have to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm okay not making my own meals and stuff, like it's, not that big of a deal. So I think there is going to be some equilibrium there. But most of the people that have short-term rentals are people that have had these properties for at least 24 months or more. And I think for a lot of them, it's longer than that. And so they're still sitting at really low interest rates. They still have a decent amount of equity in their home, because even worst case scenario, and they bought the home originally as a primary residence and only put 5% down and then switched it to an investment property. If you did that, if you bought the property 2 or 3 years ago, you're still sitting on 30-40% in equity because of home prices. But if you bought it originally as an investment property and had to put 20-25% down 2 to 3 years ago, and now have an additional 20-30%, 40% in price appreciation over the last 3 to 5 years, you have so much equity in the home that, okay, great, maybe I can't maximize the profit the way I was the last couple of years, but either I will have it rented out a few less days, maybe bring down my rent a little bit so it's not quite as much, or turn it into a long-term rental, because you're still probably, with the fact that rents have risen as much as they have, you still probably can cover your mortgage and payments based on that. So I do think there is a shift that way, but I don't see it suddenly leading to a ton of people putting their home on the market because they're not getting the same short-term rental income that they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was so the hosts of the show are investors on this Bigger Pockets podcast. The guest was obviously the Fed representative, but she didn't work there anymore. And she was like doom and gloom. All right, Dallas is done. Austin's done. You got these big investors who went in and bought hundreds of these short-term rentals at a time, and now it's just kind of like shadow inventory, as she was calling it. Not just that, but like the build to rent communities and that sort of thing that are out there that she assumes we're going to be hitting the market and coming to market for sale instead of just for rent. And so I just didn't know. She specifically talked about Dallas and Austin. And so I didn't know if you'd seen anything like that in a big way.
Yeah,
having a big impact.
And not that again, I also don't feel like Austin, for the same reasons that I said, hey, if you're an individual looking to buy a single family home and rent it here, Austin may not be the best for immediate cash flow because of our property taxes. I also feel like that's affected. Like I don't feel like a lot of the build to rent communities that have been around or that have been talked about, I don't feel like they've been focused on Austin, right? Like Austin's relatively expensive to buy land in. And if you're having to pay property taxes and you can't put a homestead exemption on these properties because they're rental properties, like that's going to keep going up, which means unlike Georgia, where your property taxes are relatively low, as rents keep going up, you're probably continue to make more and more of a cash flow situation, where in Texas, because your property taxes can keep going up, not that you wouldn't get more cash flow down the road, but it's not going to be at the same kind of level. And so I just don't feel like there's been a ton of that. It has been interesting. I know there's been these iBuyers in the past. Obviously, Zillow got out of it because they weren't very good at buying homes and then trying to flip them. But I've seen some like Open Door and some of these other places that had bought homes. They would always price it like they'd buy a home and they obviously bought it at too expensive a price because they'd always price it way too high back on the market. And you're like, this isn't going to sell for 90 days, 120 days. And then finally, when the market got up to where they were kind of at, then they might eventually sell. And so again, I mean, there's always a possibility. I definitely don't keep up with the market so much that there couldn't be a subdivision or two subdivisions that were being built that had that kind of ability. But the other component with that is, in most cases, they're also the homes that these companies were building were generally first time home buyer homes, type of homes, right? You're not going into high-end subdivision and building $1 million homes that are you're trying to, a subdivision to rent out of. Like, that's not where the money is at. The money is at, hey, how can I build in Austin, a $300,000 starter home and rent out in that community? And so honestly, if we suddenly got an influx of those types of homes, that wouldn't be the worst thing ever for this market, because the first time home buyers have been the hardest people, have been the most challenged in this market. And so, yeah, it might depress prices a little bit, but I still think there's a lot of people who'd be like, great, there's actually a bunch of homes on the market that I can actually afford. And so it just wouldn't be the same thing.
Yeah.
To me, for Austin, the biggest thing affecting us right now is that because we're so tech heavy in Amazon, Google, Facebook, all these types of places, is that the constant layoffs that have been happening and kind of the lack of hiring just has a lot of people on edge of like, well, it's not really the best time for me to buy a home or to step up and buy a bigger home. And so a lot of people are kind of waiting on the sidelines that way, between that and then obviously the higher interest rates. Yeah. This is the second big thing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, let's talk about investing in general for you then, because I'm always curious to chat. So, have you thought about investing, or have you looked at? Do you own? Do you rent? Like, what's?
So I own my primary residence. I bought it about just over 10 years ago, actually, about 10 and a half years ago, and so it's done very well in those 10 years.
Yeah.
But it's just a 2-bedroom townhome. So I didn't want to have to do the lawn maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Like I enjoy talking real estate and doing those kind of things, but at the end of the day, when I'm done with it, I kind of don't want to have to start working on my own place and kind of keeping up with it as much that way. So I enjoy it from that perspective. But I don't own any other rental property, or I don't own any other real estate properties. It's not that it's not that I think it's a bad investment, but for me, I like kind of stocks and some of the liquidity with that, and then some of the different types of alternative investment kind of things. Not that it's very heavy into it, but a little bit into like some crypto stuff, a little bit into another one of the reasons I kind of started the podcast is hopefully maybe trying to get more into the startup world and stuff. And so maybe there are things to do that way too down the road here in Austin. So on the real estate side of things, again, just because I know that I'm the type of investor. It's like, hey, I don't really want to just buy this, Class C strip mall in East Austin that I'm going to have to manage, 4 different tenants and those kind of things. Like, I like not to have, obviously you could hire a company to do some of those kind of things, but I'm like, it just didn't feel like the thing that really gets me going to be like, I own this piece of property that way. So it hasn't been something that I've invested in.
All right. So then let's talk crypto then. I'm curious. I had a crypto guy come on, and his whole thing was he has a fund, and being in the fund world and being in the syndication world and that sort of thing. Like, those are the types of operators that I like talking to, just to kind of find out what type of return profiles they're targeting and what it looks like compared to a real estate fund, obviously. And so, what do you have on crypto and what's getting you going right now? Do you think are you Bitcoin to
so for me,
or what?
So for me on the crypto side of things, it's more kind of the technology, cryptocurrency, blockchain, Web3 in general, like obviously like AI and all that kind of stuff that's going on, and just seeing like kind of how the future of the internet and business and those kind of things are going. So I own a handful of NFTs. I own a little bit of crypto, but not a whole lot. I know there's a lot of people that would get into all different kinds of on the crypto side of things, but it's obviously pretty volatile. And a lot of people that were doing it also, again, it's definitely not something I was doing full time. So I feel like for to be successful at it at all, you kind of had to be almost day trading it, like really staying on top of it, because you could see a lot of the people who were making money. Were they really making money? Because I think we all know someone who's a day trader who talks about all their gains, but never talks about that they've lost twice as much on the days that they lose. But there's, different platforms like Ethereum, Polkadot, and whatnot, where people were, you'd have these really weird crypto finance things where you could stake coins and get these big returns. But then we also saw some huge crashes because of it. And so it's like, it was very obvious to me right away, like, great, I can stake this and somehow it's like a savings account, but I can make 18% on them. Like, the only reason you're going to give out 18% of it is if it's pretty volatile on the other side of things. And so for me, it's been more of, hey, I think there's a couple of cryptocurrencies and blockchains that are likely to be successful long term. So if I hold a little bit of those things, there's a chance that they'll do really well. Obviously, Bitcoin's an interesting component just because of that finite number of Bitcoins that can be ever created. And as we're seeing with the US dollar, that printing money endlessly is not always a good thing. Like, it might seem good in the moment, when you kind of keep the wheels greased for a little while, but then suddenly you run up against inflation and the US dollar not being quite as valuable, and all these other places talking about trying to make other currencies the reserve currency of the world, or use these other currencies, which isn't, from the stuff that I know, is not likely to happen for a lot of different reasons. Like, people don't trust a lot of these other countries, and so many things are traded in the US dollar that to get switched over to the yuan or something like that is just really not practical at all. But it is interesting that, for the last, since probably the real estate crash, in 08, the solution to make sure things don't get as bad as they could get has been to print money. And I get it. Like, I don't have any desire to go through a Great Depression kind of scenario, but like, just printing money has side effects that I feel like a lot of times politicians and the people in charge don't take into consideration near as much. And so it's led to some interesting stuff. And it's also going to affect the real estate market, right? Like, because so many, like myself, I have a 3.25% interest rate. Well, at some point in time, if I got married and had kids and I'm like, okay, this 2-bedroom townhome is not big enough anymore. Well, again, rates, who knows what rates will be in 5 years, but say in 5 years, if rates were still at 6.5%, 7%, do I really want to sell and go buy a larger place that's more expensive and have to go from a 3.25% rate to a 6.5%, 7% interest rate? Yeah. Like, that crazy is how that will affect my payment.
Yeah.
And so I think you have
doubles your payment.
Yeah. And so you have a lot of people who I think are going to stay in their homes for a lot longer, which is going to hurt inventory, which is another reason prices aren't going down at all, because people aren't going to be selling their homes anytime soon, and is going to keep people potentially in their homes longer than they normally would, which again has a trickle effect on when people move. That's a lot of times new homes getting built, homes getting remodeled, furniture, all the kind of stuff that helps the U.S. economy do stuff that doesn't happen as much if people don't move. And so, again, it's not surprising that politicians and policymakers a lot of times think very short-sighted, because they're elected officials and they're worried about this next election and their approval ratings and stuff. But it'll be interesting to see how it all impacts things for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, same. I mean, in just thinking about that, we had a development that we were doing. It was a 14-unit townhouse deal, and I admit we got skittish about building it just because the way the market was headed. But when we talk about it, and you're not the only one that just has mentioned how inventory, owners holding onto their properties longer has created an inventory shortage, and that's what's keeping demand high, even with the high interest rates. I wonder if, and I know a lot of builders, like, we're walking away from dirt, walking away from neighborhoods just because of the uncertainty. But you look at it now and you're like, maybe that's a mistake. Maybe you should be building more now because the demand is still there. And so that might be I don't know. It's an interesting.
I mean, no, like I said, the demands, but again, right. The on the builder side of things, I understand it a little bit more, because they're, they're public companies looking in their best interest. Like you don't want to become a soft bank where you overextend yourself and suddenly you have to go bankrupt and whatnot. I also think the interest rate side of things is going to hurt him. And I think the interest rate side of things is going to hurt inventory levels for the next 10 plus years, because even if we come back down to say 5.5, which is probably more where we should be, the fact that we were so low for so long, right? Like as much as I don't have a huge desire to go out and buy a bunch of rental properties, I also potentially would be a fool for ever selling my place that's at a 3.25% interest rate, because if interest rates never come back down this low, which I think they will at some point in time, just because at some point they're going to want to get them as low as possible, because that's what, kind of what they want to do to keep the wheels greased. But in reality, they probably only should have maybe come down this low for 6 months and then stayed in the 4% range. But if they stay 4 or 5%, which is a more sustainable long-term interest rate, well, then this 3.25% interest rate is it's not a unicorn because a lot of people have it, but it's this thing that you could never get back again. And so why would I ever decide to sell it at that point in time? So I think you have a lot of people who will turn their primary residences into an investment property whenever they make their next move, if they can. Not everyone can do that, because you need sometimes the equity to be able to afford the next place. But kind of why would you? And now that then means less inventory on the market, keeping prices higher as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting to the end here. Again, you're active. You're actually going out. Everything you eat what you kill type thing. So do you look at it, again, self-employed? Do you look at retirement and you say, what am I doing? Where's the money going to come from long term? Because that's definitely something that I look at and think about. And that's why I transitioned into the apartments, because I want these assets to be able to, feed me and my kids and future generations and that sort of thing. And so, I mean, if you're looking to get in the startup world, that's just a completely different route. I love that. I had a buddy living in Austin. We were always talking about startups. We went through a few accelerator type programs here in San Antonio, geeked them, put on a few. Nice. Very cool. I love that world. I love the whole startup mentality, the entrepreneurial journey, all of that. But so is that kind of like, are you looking for something like that? Are you looking for a startup that you are either going to start yourself, or are you going to get into working with one, or, what?
No, so that's definitely on my radar. Kind of thing is like, hey, what would be something either maybe to start, or even potentially to be in the first dozen or so people to kind of get into something I think, this sounds fun, exciting, something I'd be passionate about that way. So there's a little bit of that I do kind of keep feelers and stuff out for. As far as like retirement, like it's something, I mean, I have IRA accounts and some different things. Again, a SEP IRA is an amazing thing that self-employed people can take advantage of if you're able to save the money. But again, investing in real estate is another good thing, right? Like it's at some point in time, if I also am not someone who feels like I want to retire in 20 years, which is I'd be 64 at that point in time. Like maybe at that point in time, I'm like, I want to retire. I just want to sit on the beach and play beach volleyball. I don't know. So that could be the case as well too. But it's also kind of like, okay, well, not that I, want to keep working until I'm 80 or 90 per se, but if you enjoy it, like, okay, you could do that. But having, again, at some point in time, if I decide, hey, I just do want to go live down in Costa Rica, like I could already make some cash flow in this place. And, if you're making in 20 years, if suddenly you're making $5,000 a month cash flow on a rental property in Austin, which I think is depending on what happens over the next 20 years in Austin. I saw something today or yesterday or today online that said like 2100. So that's obviously 70 years away, not 20 years away. That Austin's supposed to have 22 million people in it. So at that acceleration kind of pace, like real estate prices are going to continue to go up pretty substantially. And so it's like, okay, there are a bunch of different kind of avenues, I guess, that things could go down, but there isn't necessarily like one specific plan I have.
Got it. Yeah.
At this point.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I just, again, I always think about that, and I'm always talking to my buddies about it, just trying to have that conversation. Like, what are you working on? What are you, How are you set up for retirement? That sort of thing. So yeah, if the startup world again is just like a completely different animal, and that in itself can create opportunities for just exits that, if that's your plan, then it's like, that's,
I'm definitely not like banking on, I'm going to build, I'm going to become a millionaire because of a startup per se that way. But right. But like just being, I like say the building of different things. It's like, I thought I was going to be maybe an engineer, years ago. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I really like that after taking a few classes long term, but just that kind of building and growing process, I've just always kind of found interesting. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways to do things out there. Again, having the podcast, if you really stick with it, maybe in a couple of years, you're making a little bit of money off of a podcast, right? Too. Like for me, I think it'd be cool to have a handful of different avenues that are bringing in a little bit of kind of passive income and stuff. And so that way you're kind of getting a chance to do a bunch of different things. You're not solely reliant on one specific income stream, because that can always be a little precarious as well too. But just kind of trying to do as many different things as I can and keep the options open.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I love it. There's a book called Multiple Streams of Income. And it's, that's right up that alley right now in this market. There's so many little things that you can do, that don't have to be real estate related, like Amazon businesses, like,
I've looked a little bit into that and stuff too. Yeah. And like, there's like, okay, maybe that would be kind of an interesting thing just to, if you could, and so it's kind of like, what do you want to commit to? Cause that's the biggest thing. Like as much as I do like a lot of different little things, you can run the risk of like not committing fully to something, which is, it's usually hard to get the full benefit out of something if you're only doing it part-time kind of.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I think consistency on the podcast is the same thing. I talk about it a lot. It's just like a labor of love. So I appreciate you all listening, coming back because yeah, it is. It takes a lot of work, but maybe at some point in the future, you can monetize stuff like that and actually get some cash flow from it. Well, hey, look, I want to wrap it up. We get a couple questions asked, just kind of get to know Troy a little bit better. What's your favorite pastime not related to work?
I mean, beach volleyball or fitness type of stuff. So getting into the gym, getting out on the court and being competitive and trying to pretend like I'm still young is a lot of fun.
Yeah, right on. Any like solid or like best thing that's happened, I guess, in the last 60 days or so? Like what's some of the things that stick out in your mind?
Last 60 days, I mean, life is good, right? Like I think a lot of times we can look at the things that are challenging in life, and I realize, hey, I got to wake up. I'm fortunate that my extended family is all healthy. I'm going to get to go see all of them here in a couple of weeks, and so everything else is good. But yeah, like the relationships, and then the relationships that you build with other people, right? The connections you can make through stuff like this podcast or just talking to people. So
yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, Troy, sorry about that. Troy, is great having you on.
You're not the first person to do that, and you won't be the last.
So. I get Ryan, I get Ronald, I get Brandon a lot. So yeah, Troy, it's good catching up. Thanks for sharing the info and jumping on, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. All right, guys, that was Troy. Great conversation. It was great having him on the show. If you're looking for real estate in the Austin market, definitely reach out to him. His contact information is in the show notes. One thing that I want to highlight just at the end there, we're talking about multiple streams of income and things that he's looking at in his life. And he's looking for, jumping into a startup or investing in crypto, and having a different approach to building incremental streams of income that are passive, that are able to grow his cash flow. And so just because we talk about it a lot on the show about investing in real estate, investing in apartments, investing in, alternative assets and that sort of thing. If you have something specific that you have found that is able to generate incremental increases in your passive income, man, I would love to hear about them. Shoot me an email, talk to me about it, reach out to me on LinkedIn, just because I'm always curious to have those conversations. Like, how are you able to grow those incremental bits of cash flow through multiple streams? And so there's a great book out there, Multiple Streams of Income. It talks about that and how to do that. So I'm going to make an effort to actually bring on some more guests. And so if you want to jump on the show and you have some of these strategies lined up, I would love to have that conversation with you and then share that with the whole community. So thanks for jumping on. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.
Did you know that 80% of the agents we speak with got into real estate in order to gain passive income so they could obtain financial freedom and become work optional? If you want to stay up to date, the best way is to make sure you're subscribed. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do it now. We'll catch you on the next episode.